Hey, what's up, YouTube fans? I saw this video from this creationist, old Earth creationist YouTube channel called Reasons to Believe. This guy named Fazale Rana. He made a video called, I think it was called "Have Humans Evolved?" and he gave reasons for why he thinks, like, basically microevolution yes, macroevolution no. So I was gonna show the video clip, right, and then give some critiques, some responses to what he said. I do kind of think that he has a bit more of a respectable position than like Answers in Genesis, people like that, respectable presentation, but I do have some critiques. All right, I'll show you guys the video clip, then give my response.
Is evidence for human evolution evidence that humans evolved? Without a question, since our inception as a species about 100 to 150,000 years ago, it's very clear that human beings have evolved. For example, anthropologists have documented that the average brain size for humanity about 100,000 years ago was 1,500 centimeters cubed, and today it's 1,350 centimeters cubed. When humans first appeared on Earth, we were not able to digest milk sugar after 2 years of age. And about 10,000 years ago, in different parts around the world, human beings evolved what's called lactase persistence, where they now are able to digest milk sugar into adulthood. And then as humans began to migrate around the world, regional differences emerged in humanity. These regional differences account for racial diversity in humanity and involve differences in facial features, body shape, skin color, things like that. The bottom line is that human beings have evolved. And many people will use this as evidence for human evolution, that we have an evolutionary origin as a species. Now, I disagree with that because all of these examples are instances of what we would call microevolution, variation taking place within a species. In fact, as someone who holds to a creation model perspective, I would actually argue that this ability for microevolution is part of God's providential care for all life on Earth, giving organisms, including human beings, the ability to adapt to an ever-changing world. So when God said to multiply and fill the earth, because we had this capacity for microevolutionary change, we could actually move into new environments and not only survive those environments, but actually thrive in them. But the point here is this, that evidence for evolution happening at one scale of biological change is not legitimate evidence for evolution happening at another scale of biological change. Let me explain. When I think about evolution, I like to think about 5 categories of evolution. Microevolution, which would be like the peppered moths changing their wing color in response to environmental pollution. Speciation, where one species gives rise to a closely related sister species, like the Galapagos finches. Or microbial evolution, where microorganisms can evolve, like bacteria acquiring resistance to antibiotics. All 3 categories of evolution are well evidenced. None of them are controversial. But there's also 2 other categories of evolution that lack, I think, scientific rigor and support. One of them is chemical evolution, the idea that molecules could self-organize into the very first cells. There's some serious scientific challenges to that idea. Or the idea of macroevolution, where one major group could evolve to give rise to another major group, like an ape-like creature giving rise to humans. And so the point being this, that there are scientific challenges to chemical evolution and macroevolution, and that we want to be careful not to accept evidence for evolution at one scale, microevolutionary changes, as evidence for macroevolution. The evidence has to correspond to the level of biological transformation. If you want to know more about how you can think about evolution, I invite you to consider checking out the book, Thinking About Evolution. I was one of the co-authors along with Sue Dykes, Mark Perez, and A.J. Roberts.
Okay, so you guys heard the points he raised there. I have a few critiques. So first, I don't feel like the distinction between quote-unquote microevolution versus quote-unquote macroevolution is very clearly defined where exactly we draw the line. He did not provide a clear distinction other than just macro is larger than micro, but I mean how much larger? He didn't delineate that. There's differing definitions of where we draw the line between macro and microevolution. The most commonly used definition of macroevolution is evolution at or above the species level. And that's something that already most creationists nowadays, at least, are down with, including Fazale Rana. Most of the major creationist organizations, Answers in Genesis, Creationist Ministries International, Institute for Creation Research, they all say that, generally, like they're all down with speciation, large groups of many species all being related. They generally say that up to the taxonomic family level, generally that everything within the group could all be related, right? Even amongst creationists nowadays, the major creationist organizations, that's the most common view. And even though they wouldn't want to call it macroevolution, that's enough that it could actually be considered macroevolution, right? And so if he is wanting to say that entire taxonomic families all being related, that would not be enough to count as macroevolution, I would want to know what would be enough. Where exactly do we draw the line as to what's the distinction between micro versus macroevolution, right? If it's such an important distinction, then you should have a clear idea of where do we draw the line, right? And then as his example of something that would be a macroevolutionary change, he gives as an example the transition from ape to human. But see, what I think is a bit facetious about using that as your example is that is not something that happens in a single step, right? It's not it's not like a direct change directly from like a creature more like a chimpanzee directly from that to human in a single step. It's a compilation of many steps. It does not happen all at once, right? So it's not something that all happened at once in a single step, right? Like directly from something like a chimp directly to human. It's a series of steps, several, many steps that did not even all happen at once. They didn't happen at the same time, right? And most if not all of these individual isolated steps on their own will be microevolution, right? And so I would want for him to pinpoint a specific step along the way that he would consider to be macroevolution, right? Because ape to human, that's not something that all happens at once. It's a compilation of many steps, right? And obviously, if you can have microevolution, you can have microevolution again, and then microevolution again, and then microevolution again. And so I would want for him to pinpoint a single step that's, in his view, macroevolution, saying ape to human. That's not something that happens all at once. It's a compilation of many steps, right? And so we would want to look at any individual step any isolated step along the way and ask, is this micro or macro evolution? What exactly do we consider to be the distinction if it's such an important difference? You know, if it's such an important difference, we should have a clear idea of like the hard and fast, you know, very clear, very distinct difference, that it's not just that one is a compilation of many of the other. What is the precise difference? I don't think anyone has a clear idea of what exactly that difference is supposed to be, right? So, all right, that's all for now. See you guys.